Gracious Father, Lord, thank you. We are overjoyed, Lord, to be in your presence, to worship you, Lord, in the beauty of your holiness, Father. Lord, through your Son Yeshua, Lord, you have given us hope. You've given us tremendous amount of joy and bitachon. And we never forget, Lord, that we are children. Lord, have mercy on us, Lord. Let your kindness flow, Lord, through us in all circumstances of our life, Father. We gathered here today, Father, to learn of you, to seek your presence, to know that you are King of kings and Lord of lords. You are great, beyond everything that we know or we understand. Put everybody into your precious hands, Lord. You be the benevolence to our souls, the manna that we so desire, Lord. We're thirsty, we're hungry. Impart into us your wisdom and understanding, Lord. Learn things. Together we say, Father, in the name of your Son, Yeshua, Lord, thank you once again. And let this time be into your hands for the kingdom, for your kingdom and for your glory. So, friends, we are in Purim today. Purim just got over, in fact, at sundown. Nevertheless, it's it's a festival of joy. It's a festival of where people are supposed to, the Jewish nation is supposed to celebrate. Okay. But before we celebrate, does anyone know what a nigun is? I doubt anyone knows what a nigun is. So if you visit Israel, or if you ever go to the Chabad house, and if you go to the Orthodox Jews, they have this thing called a nigun. It's a kind of it's a musical melody that really does not have words with it. Okay, but it just has a kind of a tune to it, and they sing it, and it's like a chant, and they just have a good time with that nigun. So if you ever have a chance, if you go to YouTube and just type, Kabad and nigun, and just type nigun, and you'll just be wondering what are these Jewish people doing, but it's really an amazing thing. So they just kind of la ba 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 da ba da 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 da. So they have these tunes, and they just everybody's in unison, and everybody's really enjoying themselves, and they're having a big feast, and it's really an amazing thing. Now Purim is known to be a feast where they really let go. They really enjoy themselves. They have the best. They eat, and they're eating, and they drink. They drink alcohol. They really drink on this day, top to down, from the rabbis on the top to everybody down. Some of them really get slobbered up. Okay? And the reason they drink is because they say that you got to drink so much that you don't know the difference between Arur Haman and Baruch Mordecai. So what is Arur Haman? Cursed Haman, and Baruch Mordecai, and blessed Mordecai. If I take the gematria of the two of them, is the same. So what you can see with your physical eyes, it's not truth. There's something else happening in the background. And everything is hidden in the book of Esther. In the storyline, everything is hidden, right? If you read the Megillah Esther, you will realize that God's name is not mentioned even once. Not even once in this entire. There are no physical miracles that happen. There's nothing wondrous happen. There's not a moment in this book that you can say, aha, this is a divine intervention. It is subtle, it's in the background, it's happening outside the purview of human knowledge and wisdom and understanding. But the storyline, ultimately, when everything is over, then you can sit down and say, 1 second, something has happened. And what has happened has been a miracle in itself, but why didn't we see it when everything was happening? And that is why this book, or the character in this book, this lady, is called Esther. What's the meaning of Esther? It comes from the Hebrew word star, sitar. Sitar means to hide, to conceal. So everything is concealed. Truth is concealed. God is concealed, just as God Himself is concealed from this world. God has concealed Himself in Simtsum, in many, many levels of extraction of Himself from this physical world that we're living in. You cannot see, touch, feel, and know God. He's concealed from everything. But that does not mean He's not in charge. It does not mean that God is not working behind the scenes. It does not mean that there is no truth. But what is visible is not truth. This is what the book Esther is about. Now, uh, historically, if I want to understand who are these main characters in this book, who's King Achashverosh, who's Hadassah, who's actually the name of this beautiful lady called Hadassah. Okay, she's been named Esther because of a symbolic meaning of what the story is all about. And most probably, King Akashverosh was the one who called her Esther because he would have realized that beauty is hidden, it's something else. And by the way, in Persian, Esther means refers to the moon, right? The moon. So that's what Esther means in Persian. Nevertheless, her Hebrew name is Hadassah. And the story starts with Akashverosh. There's this king, Akashverosh, and he is the king of Persia. And he rules over 127 Midian, Medina, sorry, 107 Madinot, 127 provinces, right starting from the Indus Valley, that's ancient Hudu, ancient India, right up to Egypt, and right up till Libya and Egypt and all these ancient places. Mm. And by the way, Kush is basically the Arabian Peninsula historically. Anyway, so we're talking about right up to Egypt. He ruled this entire area from the Carpathian Mountains on top, Mongolia, Armenia, all those steppes, right till the huge provinces. How did this all fall into his hands? So historically, let's understand that King Nebuchadnezzar, the oldest empire besides Egypt, uh, was the Babylon Empire, and Nebuchadnezzar got up and he came and he came and he destroyed the first temple and he picked up the Jews and he brought them to Babylon. And after he died, then Belshazzar was his son. He took over, and then Belshazzar died. Okay, you'll know the story of Belshazzar, and he died because uh, the Persian Empire rose. And the Persian empires came and conquered Babylon, and then Babylon got annexed into the Persian Empire, and finally all that came into one empire. And and then the story of Akashverosh starts because Akashverosh now uh, grew up from a very humble beginning, an extremely humble beginning. That's why it emphasizes in verse 1 of the Megillah. It says, "Vayi be'emei Achashverosh hu Achashverosh Hamelech mehudu ve'ad kush sheva ve'esrim ve'me'at midianat madinot." Achashverosh. Now, if I want to break this name Achashverosh, Achar, what is Achar in Hebrew? The other one. Ve Rosh. What is Rosh? The source. So I want you to understand Akashverosh stands for the source, the Rosh of the other one. Not the one that is of truth, but the one of the Sitra Akhra, the other side. He's the prince of the other side. Akher Verosh, Akashverosh. His name symbolizes that he's the alternate one from truth, from light. The source, his root, is from the other side of creation and of God. Okay, comes from the Sitra Akhra. So now everything that Akashverosh does is rooted in the impurities of creation. The embellishment of all creation is rooted in Akashverosh. Okay, so all have your Torah with you. Please turn to Megillat Esther, and we're going to read some things and we're going to study. It may take a little time to difference, but just bear with me. Okay. Now, historically, who is this person called Mordecai? And who's Hadassah? And who's Haman? Previously, in previous years, we studied historically that Haman comes from the line of Esau, because Esau's sons were Amalek. Amalek had a king by the name of Agag. Agag had progeny, he had children, and his children came down to the time, and one of his children were now Haman, who is in Shushan in the palace with King Akashverosh. So that's the descent of Haman. What's the descent of Mordecai? In chapter 2 of the book of Esther, it says, in verse 3, it says, okay, verse he says, Ish Yahudi Haya Beshushan Habira Ushmo Mordecai ben Yair ben Shimei ben Kish Ish Yamini. So he was from the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, he was the son of Shimei, who was the son of Yair, and who was the son of Kish. Now, who is this Kish? Who's Kish? In 1 Samuel chapter 9, we stumble upon who Kish is. Turn with me to 1 Samuel chapter 9, and we're going to read who this Kish is and who is his progeny. Okay, 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1, it says, Vaish Maben Yiman Mabinyamin Ushmo Kish Ben Aviel Ben Zaror Ben Bechoroth Ben Efiach Ben Ish Yemini Nebor Chail. There was a man of Binyamin whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, son of Zeror, son of Bechoroth, son of Afia, of Binyamin, a man of substance. He was a very rich man. Okay, from the tribe of Benjamin. And he had a son whose name was Saul, an excellent young man. No one among the Israelites was as handsome as he was, and he was a head taller than any of the people. Man, this guy was handsome, absolutely stunning and handsome. If anyone had looked at him, what a beautiful man. And he was rich, he was handsome. And when Israel cried out to God, saying, Give us a king, God said, Okay, I'll give you Saul of Kish, son of Kish, as a king. And then Shmuel came and anointed him king. But King Saul made a great mistake, a very grievous mistake. What was his mistake? In chapter 15, we read of 1 Samuel. Verse 2, God says, he tells Samuel, he says, Thus says the Lord of hosts, I'm exacting the penalty for what Amalek did to Israel. What did Amalek do to Israel? When they left Egypt, Amalek came from the back and slaughtered down the poor, the sick, the young, the elderly, the feeble, the tired, and everybody who were lurking behind. He came from the back like a coward and he struck down so many of the people who were tired and weak from the journey, and the helpless and the poor. And God didn't like it at all. It was a cowardly act, and God said, Amalek will no more exist before me on the face of this earth. You will destroy Amalek. And for what Amalek did, God is saying, now I'm going to extract penalty for what Amalek has did to Israel for the assault he made upon them on the road on the way to up from Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek and prescribe and destroy everything that belongs to him. Spare no one, but kill alike man and woman, infants and sucklings, oxen, sheep, camels, and asses, everything. Now, can you imagine? God was kind and gracious and loving and compassionate, full of chesed and full of care and grace, is telling Saul, "You will go and you will be my instrument of penalty to destroy Amalek from the face of this earth. You will destroy everything of him. You will leave no man standing. Everything will be destroyed because God foresaw and he foresaw and he knew what was going to happen. Therefore, he instructs Shmuel and tells Shmuel to tell Saul, this is what you got to do. You know, I sometimes am really surprised. We take the words of God very lightly, very, very lightly. When God says something, we want to use our own brains. We put it out in front of us and we say, okay, now this is what God has said. Let me try and analyze what God's saying and let me find out what is important, what's not important. Who are you? God's word is final, and everything that God says is of great importance. We don't go trying to use our own mind and trying to prioritize what is necessary, what is not necessary, nothing. God says, do it, just do it. This is what we have to understand. So many times in our life, God has said, this needs to be done. But we've said, well, okay, why don't I do it now? Maybe I'll do it next year. I got something else to do. No, friends. God is absolutely perfect in the things that he says. And he's telling Saul here, and he's not missing what he says, you will destroy everything. What does Saul do? In verse 7, it says, Saul destroyed Amalek from Havilah all the way to Shur, which is close to Egypt, and he captured King Agag of Amalek alive. He was supposed to strike him down. He's supposed to break him, slaughter him. But catch him. You know why does he catch him alive? I'll tell you why. Pride. Saul was taller than any man. So when the Bible says he was tall, he was not tall only physically on stature, but he was very tall in his own eyes. He wanted glory for himself. So what did he do? He thought that he destroyed Amalek, not God. So he saved the king because the king is the prize, right? And he paraded Agag saying, see, this is my cap, this is my captive. This is what I have done to Amalek. And he paraded Agag. And God was watching him. God told him, you will destroy everything. He disobeyed God. And because he disobeyed God, what did his army do? His army went and they brought the best of the sheep, best of the flock, and they saved this and they saved that and they saved this. And they all bring it. And Shmuel comes and he says, Shmuel Ahanavi, and he says, Saul, what have you done? He says, whatever God has asked me to do, I've done. So Saul says, you've done a grave mistake. You were supposed to destroy everything. And because you've not destroyed everything, now the penalty for this is going to be very, very huge, extremely huge. So see now look at the words, what Saul tells Shmuel, okay? The word of the Lord then came to Samuel. He says, I regret I made Saul king, for he has turned away from me and has not carried out my commands. Shmuel then distressed, and he entreated the Lord for all night long. Samuel prayed for Saul. He said, Lord, he's your king, Lord. One you have appointed, Lord. Forgive him, Lord. But you see, God may forgive, but the consequences of your actions, God is not going to do anything. It's going to play out. It is going to play out. So he says, Samuel was distressed and he entreated the Lord all night long. Early in the morning, Samuel went to meet Saul. Samuel was told, Saul went to Carmel, where he erected a monument for himself. Then he left and went down to Gilgal. When Samuel came to Saul, Saul said to him, Blessed are you of the Lord. I have fulfilled the Lord's commands. And now what? See the audacity of this man. It's unbelievable. Okay. Complete audacity of this man. Then he says, then demands, and then Samuel says, Is this the bleating of sheep in my ears and the lowing of oxen that I hear? Saul answered, They were brought from the Amalekites, for the troops spared the choicest of the sheep and the oxen for sacrificing to the Lord your God, and we proscribed the rest. We destroyed the rest. Samuel said to him, Saul, stop. Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night. You know what Saul said to him? Speak. And Samuel said, You may look small to yourself. You may think you're very humble, but you are the head of the tribes of Israel. You're the Rosh, you're the head of the tribes of Israel. Know this and understand this. The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and the Lord sent you on a mission, saying, Go and destroy the sinful Amalekites, make war on them until you have exterminated them, destroyed them from the face of the earth. Why did you disobey the Lord and swoop down on the spoil in defiance of the Lord's will? Saul said to Samuel, But I did obey the Lord and I performed the mission on which the Lord. Damn it, I have done the right thing. Done the right thing. And I performed the mission on which the Lord has sent me. I captured King Agag of Amalek and I proscribed Amalek. And the troops took from the spoil some sheep and oxen, the best of which has been proscribed, to sacrifice to the Lord your God at Gilgal. You know, King Saul sounds so different. It's amazing when I look at King Saul earlier. He says, I've taken the choices to sacrifice to the Lord your God, Samuel, not my God, not our God, not the God of Israel, to your God. You see the defiance, see the pride of this man. Unbelievable, unbelievable. And then Samuel told him, he said, Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as he obedience to the Lord's commands? Surely obedience is better than sacrifice, compliance of them than the fat of wine. For rebellion is like the sin of sorcery. To rebel against God's words is just as good as being partaking of sorcery and witchcraft. It's as simple as that. Disobedience to God's word is considered by the Torah and by the Bible as sorcery. These are very strong words I'm giving you, but it's words from the Torah, not my words. Then Saul said to Samuel, I did wrong to transgress the Lord's commands and your instructions, but I was afraid for the troops and I yielded to them. Please forgive me. But Samuel said to him, I will not go back with you, for you have been rejected of the Lord's command, and the Lord has rejected you as king over all Israel. Then Saul seized the corner of his robe and it tore, and Samuel said to him, "The Lord has this day torn the kingship over Israel away from you and has given it to another who is worthier than you." No, I'll tell you, friends, I'll tell you one thing. If God is giving you a ministry, if God is giving you a work, is giving you something to do, and you have done something wrong and disobedient to Him, and if He's taken it away, it's gone forever. We have to be very, very careful about this. Extremely careful about this. Why? Because if it's once you have destroyed and showed disobedience, it's because you do not understand the effects and the implications of your actions. Now, what do I mean by this? You and me may be believers, born again, spirit filled, walking, good lives, everything. But our everyday actions are a choice that we take. This is what we don't understand in our lives, in our walk in the kingdom. The actions that we do have implications. Some implications are small, most of the implications come to us back again in our lifetime like a boomerang. Some implications come generations after us. Because if God has told you to do something, God is foreseeing the future, and to avoid that situation in the future, God is asking you to get rid of it now. But that disobedience, oh man, this is huge. This is really huge. And this is why the kingdom was torn away from Saul. Now, why am I telling you all this now? Because here we read that King Agag was the son of Amalek. He was a king of Amalek. Amalek was the son of Esau. Esau was the brother of Yaakov. Agag's progeny, Agag's children was who? Haman, who we come across in the book of Esther, Hadassah. And God knew this was going to happen. But if God is going to sit and explain everything to you, then there's no point. He just wants obedience from us. But we got to listen to him. So he tells Saul, he says, "You destroy this, don't ask any questions. In my wisdom, I'm advising you to do this because it's going to affect generations on the line." 500 years down the line, Haman, from the progeny of King Agag, the Amalekite, the son of Esau, now finally has become a thorn in the flesh of the Jewish people. Do you see the effects of one simple disobedience? And this is what God wanted to avoid, basically. But now it's playing out 550 years after this. When did this happen? Around 1000 BC. King David and King Solomon was like 1000 BC. The first temple was destroyed in 485, 525 BC. 500 years after this, now the disobedience is playing out in the book of Esther. We're looking at Esther as Esther was a great queen, and there was King Akashverosh, and this is what happened, and Jews are saved, and everything was they're all having a party. And that's not the story, my friends. That's absolutely not the story. The story is about rectification. And I keep using this word tikkun all the time, rectification. If you all follow me all the time, I keep using this word tikkun, 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 rectification. Forgiveness is something else. Rectification of that action is something else altogether. It's extremely important to understand this. So now we see the lineage of Haman, who Haman is. Let's go back to the book of Esther. Esther chapter 2, verse 5, it says, Ish Yahudi Benai, oh sorry, Ish Yahudi Haya Be Shushan Ben Kish. Kish. Kish had a son by the name of Saul. Now we know for sure that Mordecai was from the lineage of King Saul. Haha. Now, friends, it really amazes me. This really amazes me. This feud has been going on for 550 years in the spiritual realm. It's playing out on the earth now. Okay. Ish Yahudi Haya Beshushan Habira Ushmo Mordechai Ben Yair Ben Shimei Ben Kish Ish Yimeni from the tribe of Benjamin. Notice he's a Jew, but he's from the tribe of Benjamin. What do you mean by that? So everybody thinks like, no, you're a Jew if you're from the tribe of Yehuda. I'm sorry, Jew is something that you need to become. It can be from any tribe, the 12 tribes of Israel, or from one of the tribes of the earth. But you need to become a Jew, Yehudi. Okay. So God told Saul, you destroy them, because if you don't destroy them, this is going to play out 550 years ahead. This is what we're reading in the book of Esther. So I'm not going to go to the story now of the full book of Esther because you'll have read it, you'll understood what the story is all about. Uh, I've got a parallel to talk about. Very simple parallel. When I spoke to you all about Akashverosh, the source of Akashverosh, who's Akashverosh? The other Rosh, the other source, the source of Tuma, the source of impurity. He's the head, the source of all the other side, the Acher. Okay, jump to chapter 1. We'll read chapter 1 from verse chapter 1. Vehi bime Akashverosh hu Akashverosh Hamelech mehodu ve'ad kush sheva ve'asarim ve'me'et madinot. It happened in the days of Akashverosh. Akashverosh, that Akashverosh who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. In those days when King Akashverosh occupied the royal throne in the fortress of Shushan. In the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all the officials and the courtiers. So he came to the throne, and in 3 years, in the third year, he gave this huge banquet. And you know how many days this banquet lasted? It says 180 days. Can anyone party for 6 months, friends? Really? Can you imagine partying for 6 months? Be sick of your life. You try partying for 3 days and you'll get sick. 6 months? 6 months is it's something else. How can anyone party for 6 months? Now you'll get a glimpse into what Akashverosh is. Okay, making your minds work. Okay, let's go ahead. In the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all the officials and the courtiers and the administration of Persia and Media, the nobles and the governors and the provinces of his service. For no fewer than 180 days, he displayed the vast riches of his kingdom and the splendid glory of his majesty. You see, this world has a parallel of holiness. The root and the source of all tahara comes from God Himself. And He is the root and the source and the rosh of everything. Akhervesh, the other one, the root and source of Tuma, also has something else with it. There's a root and the source of that. So when we're reading, why did he call for this feast of 180 days? Because this is about splendor. This is about uh, the niceties of life, the fullness of all things. This represents gaiety, glamour, richness, fullness of food, drink, alcohol, fashion. This is what it is all about. This is what this world is about. This is what Akashverosh represents. But what are the Jewish people doing here? That's my point. The Jewish people in the provinces of Madai and Shushan and Persia and all these places, they were also enjoying, although they were in exile, but they were also enjoying this richness and this fullness of life. Now, the parallel I want to talk to you about is about two redemptions. The book of Esther talks about the hidden redemption. You must be wondering, why am I talking about redemption? Isn't the story about rectification and redemption? The Jewish people were saved, they were redeemed, they had salvation from a Torah point of view, right? Salvation was given to them, and they feasted in the end, and they gave levonim, and they gave matan, and they gave gifts. So this is one type of redemption, the hidden redemption in everybody's lives. The other redemption comes 1 month hence, is the redemption at Pesach. The redemption at Pesach is a different type of redemption. Because the redemption at Pesach has got to do with pride, authority, it's got to do with governance, it's got to do with cruelty, is the other side of life. So let me explain the difference between Akashverosh and Paro. Akashverosh stands for life of this earth, the niceties of all things, the plushness, the richness, the comfort, the fullness of all things, where the soul of a human being gets corrupted. And believe me, that corrupts the soul so much because it's a bondage that you need to be redeemed out of also. And that redemption is a hidden redemption. Whereas Pesach is about a different type of redemption. It's about the soul, it's about being crushed, it's about being burdened, it's about being someone, an authority standing over you and crushing you, right? Mitzrayim, you are in a different place. You are down. You're not up in Shushan. You're not up. You are down. In Shushan, you're up. It's about joy. Pesach, it's about crying from the bottomless portion of your soul because you're crushed in Mitzrayim. That is the open revelation. It's the open redemption. So Pesach is where everything is revealed. God came down with the 10 plagues, God revealed his power. God descended on Har Sinai, he revealed this power. That redemption was a revealed redemption. And that redemption is personal. It's about you and me, from my heart, from inside, from a korban, from my korbanot, from inside, my innards. I have to break myself like matzah bread, prepare myself like unleavened bread, and offer it. And I have feast of weeks, 7 days, counting of the Omer, preparation for Shavuot. It's gruesome. But not like Shushan, not like Purim. Purim is about the plushness of life. And that also corrupts you, my friends. Okay. This parallel, I want you to keep in mind, is very, very important. Now, let's look at chapter 1 and let's look at the root, the source of Akashverosh. Maybe all will get a little glimpse of everything. We feasted for 180 days. Then it says, at the end of this period, the king gave a banquet for 7 days. Aha. What does this catch your mind now? What is 7 days? Listen, 7 days is 1 week. Shabbat. What is the culmination of 1 week? What is the seventh day? Is the Shabbat. Now you understand why I'm saying Akash Verosh is the source, the root of the other one. Because now he's replicating holiness, but in Tuma. He's replicating everything of the kingdom of God, but in Tuma. So he had his deity for 180 days, and now for 7 days, that's replicating the essence of the Shabbat. 7 days, he gave a feast only for his courtiers and for the ones who near him. At the end of this period, the king gave a banquet for 7 days in the court of the king's palace garden for all the people who lived in the fortress in Shushan, high and low alike. Listen to what I'm saying. High and low alike. So it's talking obviously about hierarchy, right? You are a chieftain and I am a cupbearer. So I am a dishwasher. Everyone was in the feast. But when it's talking about high and low alike, it's talking about two redemptions hidden in Purim. I'm telling you one thing. Leave aside everything else. Purim is going to be the epitome of what the future is going to be like. This thing, Purim, when Mashiach comes again, when Yeshua comes, Purim is going to be the essence. We will only be able to study and understand the depth. That is why it's a hidden redemption. It will be revealed in the end, the depth of Purim. Okay, let's go ahead. Then it says, there were hangings of white cotton and blue wool. Amazing. Why were there hangings? Because he dressed his palace up like how God told Moses to dress the Mishkan up. The blue curtains and the red dyed wool. What were the colors here? White, that represents the perfection of light, and blue, that represents the periphery of light. It's the same two colors that God, Elohim, commanded the children of Israel in the book of Leviticus, Vaikra, to make tzitzit out of. Tzitzit out of. And the tzitzit, the entwined tzitzit, were entwined with white and blue because each time a Jew looked at that tzitzit, he had to realize that he was going to do something wrong. That refrained him. He said, no, I'm a Jew. I look at the tzitzit and I know my boundaries. Because the white of the tzitzit represents and reminds him that I have to be perfect. Perfect light. The perfection of light. Well, the blue of the tzitzit reminds him that blue is the boundary of visible light, of perfection of light. I cannot cross the blue and go beyond the ultraviolet and the ultra blue and all those other. No, that's not perfection of light. Perfection of light in the spectrum of light comes to the center where it's white. And pure white light is the perfection. You know, light, basically 2% of all light, out of the entire spectrum of light, only 2% of light is visible light. And in that visible light, you have the 7 colors, starting from the Adama, the red, to Tekelet, the blue, Aleph and the Taf. King Akashverosh was hanging blue and white curtains. Okay. Blue and white wool, caught up by cords of fine linen, and purple wool to silver cords and alabaster columns. And these are all the colors and the things that we use even in the Mishkan. And gold and silver and water cord. They were drinking from gold and silver. And the couches they sat on were of gold and silver on a pavement of marble, alabaster, mother of pearl and mosaic. Royal wine was served in abundance. And do you know the theme of the party? The theme of the party is no end to your drinking. Fit for a king in golden beakers of carried design, and rule for the drinking was no restrictions whatsoever. No restrictions whatsoever. Drink till you can fall, get drunk, don't get up, puke, vomit, do whatever you want, but there is no restriction for anything. If you land up falling on someone else's wife and she falls on you and you want to do something, go ahead. No restriction for anything. There is no restriction for anything. The source of Tuma, represented by Achashverosh. The alternate of the holy side is the Sitra Akra. No restrictions, for the king had given orders to every palace steward to comply with each man's wishes. If any man got up and said, I want to get drunk and I want to walk naked in a party, please go ahead, sir. No restrictions. In addition, Queen Vashti gave a banquet for women in the royal palace of King Ahasuerus. On the seventh day, effectively on the holy side, on the Shabbat day, right? On the seventh day, when the king was merry and wine with wine, he ordered Nehman, Bizetta, Harbit, Bikta, Abikta, Zetur, and Karkas, the seven eunuchs in attendance on him, to bring Queen Vashti before the king wearing a royal diadem and crown because she was supposed to be an extremely beautiful woman. To parade her, but the queen never came and he got angry and he got offended. And then the story starts that she was being put away and a edict was formed and she was put away. And then he's been advised to look at the other maidens who are prepared for him by six months, and whoever he prefers will be made queen on his behalf. And that's how Hadassah comes into play, and he takes liking to Hadassah, and uh, she's called Esther. And then Esther has a role to play. Okay. Now I'm not going to go into specifics of the entire story, but the story goes that Haman now, the spiritual feud, and this is where I keep saying the spirit of Esav is something that constantly Yaakov has to deal with in his life. The spirit of Esav is something that the Jew has to constantly deal with all his life. Because Esav represents, now I don't know how many of you all have been very regular with our teachings, but the spirit of Esav represents the klipa on every human being. The shell that is supposed to do good for us and protect our etzem. But now it's turned out to be a bane for humanity. So Esav is the klipa. This is why Esav represents the Sitra Akra, the impure side of all things, while Yaakov represents the Kedusha, the holiness of all things. This is why Lord says, Esav I have hated, but Yaakov I have loved. And he's not talking about the person, the people. He's talking about the spirit that Esav and Yaakov represents. This is extremely important to understand. What is playing out in the book of Esther here? What is playing out in the book of Esther is the rectification of the disobedience and the sin of King Shaul. Now, I want to tell all of you this. All our actions and every choice that we make is going to boomerang. Sometimes in our lifetime, sometimes very, very fast. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes, depending on the gravity of my disobedience, it's not in my lifetime. It happens to succeeding generations. And we have to be very aware of this. Our walk with God, our walk in the kingdom must be such that whatever I'm doing now, I have to look at the future and say, listen, is it going to affect the future? Because I can call out to God and say, Lord, forgive me, and God is going to forgive me. But my actions, it has consequences. This is what we forget as people. We say, God has forgiven me and everything's good. And no, my friends, you have got a salvation, you have got forgiveness. Okay, actions have catapulted many, many actions that are going to come in the future. And you know what? God has to deal with that. And every situation, when the time arises for that to be dealt with, God is there. But it takes a very simple thing. When God says just do something, why do we always prioritize? Okay, yeah, God's told me to do this. Um, Let me think about it. Is it really from God? Uh, really? That's what God wants me to do? But that's not what I think it is. I mean, that's not what I feel. Or I don't know, maybe I need a confirmation. Maybe I should ask God for a sign. I tell you, friends, we have so much to understand. So much to understand. Simple disobedience is going to take a catapult and boomerang, not only in your lifetime, in lifetimes after you. And this is very much part of Torah and of Bible. And we've seen the disobedience of Saul now playing out with Haman and with Mordecai. It's about feasting. So Purim is about feasting. Why? Because Purim represents the hidden redemption that is about the plushness of life. So let me talk about the plushness of life. The plushness of life is about when you have everything. There's no want anything in your life. If you need money, you got ample in your bank account. If you're bored, you have so many friends. If you're tired and you've been working hard and you need a vacation, oh, just pick up the phone. That's it. Out. What is it that you want in life? You got everything. But you know what? You're a slave to it because it has bound you and you cannot do without it. And you need to be redeemed from the plushness of life. In the book of Ezekiel, God defines exactly what was the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. He says that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was this, that they were bored, they had plenty, and they had so much that they didn't know what to do with them. They got corrupted. Each man had 3 and 4 wives, and all of them were beautiful. And he was bored with this wife, and he was bored with that wife, and he was bored with that wife. And he said, now I'm bored with women. Let me try men. Then he got bored with men. He said, let me try children. He said, I'm bored with everything. Let me try an animal. You see what plushness of life does to you? It corrupts you from your soul. That's what Akashvero stands for. It stands for the niceties and the plushness of life. It's a different type of corruption. It's a corruption that that takes you on a journey and makes the world so beautiful. But you know what? You can't stand before God because you love mammon and you love your life. It's like the rich man who came to Yeshua and said, Lord, I've done all these commands, I've done this, Lord. But Yeshua says, you know what? Give everything you have to the poor and become humble and follow me. He became sad. He became sad because he knew, you see, mammon had corrupted his soul. Corrupted his soul. That's what Akashvara stands for. So the redemption from Purim, the redemption at Purim is the peak of joy. It's the peak of good life. It's the peak of happiness. It's the peak of having everything in life. Therefore, if you go to Israel and if you're in Israel and you're at, at Purim and you know you're attending the Purim feast, you know they really feast and they drink alcohol. They drink, some of them really get drunk. And they drink to the point that they say, let us not let us drink so much that we don't know the difference between Arur, Haman, and Baruch Mordecai. Because Mordecai, and Haman, what is truth? Truth is hidden. I don't know who is who. God is hidden. Everything is transcendental. What I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing is not truth. There's something else beyond that. Haman may be the bad one here, Mordecai may be the good one here, but behind we don't know what is happening. So Purim is the high point of the joy of a soul enjoying life. It's the high point. Opposite to that, the redemption from Purim, I explained to you. The opposite of that now is not Akashverosh. The source is Paro, the demeaning personality, the personality that is full of authority and crushes you, who makes you low, on your knees, begging, broken, crushed. That's how the Jewish nation was in Egypt. They were crushed, broken in soul, broken in spirit. It was not a festival of joy, it was a festival of weeping. And it's gruesome to prepare yourself from Pesach, 7 days of matzah bread. Prepare. Don't don't have leaven. And then you count the Omer every day, waiting for Shavuot. And then you get Shavuot. And then after Shavuot, you're in anticipation of the day of judgment, Yom Kippur, then Rosh Hashanah, and then Sukkot, time of joy again. But the high point from that it starts with Pesach from lowly and it goes up to the highest point at Purim, 1 month before Pesach, and then it falls again. The cyclical nature of the two redemptions is about I I have everything in life. I have everything in life. But God has to throw into the mix Haman because now God is seeing me getting corrupted with everything in life. So he throws in a Haman over there, brought low. Now I cry out to God. Now my Pesach starts. It's a different type of redemption, friends. Pesach is open, it's revealed. Purim is concealed. It's it's there, it's hidden, it's concealed. That is why in the book of Esther, you don't find God's name mentioned anywhere, completely anywhere. We just read a few verses in chapter 1, and in chapter 1, we see so much of parallel between Tahara and Tuma. Believe me, we just had a glimpse of everything, Tahara and Tuma. Okay. Now, in chapter 2, It says sometime after all this happened, where he deposed Vashti and he kept Vashti, and we have no idea because what happened to Queen Vashti. Apparently, Vashti was superior in royalty to Akashverosh. There's a possibility. Okay. And Akashverosh was from very humble beginnings, and he was supposed to be someone who looked after Queen Vashti and this thing, but through male dominance, he took over everything and he claimed the throne. That is why it says, it starts with this word, that when Akashverosh was sat on the throne, in verse 1 it says, okay, when Akashverosh occupied the royal throne in the fortress of Shushan. There's no need to say this, right? It's a very superfluous kind of verse. When he occupied the throne, what do you mean? He was crowned king, he became king. That's it. He became king ruler. He occupied the throne. What did he do? That means there was a kind of relationship between Vashti and him. Vashti was from the royal side, and Akashverosh was somebody who probably was supposed to uh, look after that royalty, but he took over being a man. And now he got drunk and he had this wonderful feast and he summons royalty. So Queen Vashti says, Akashverosh, I am the royal one, not you. You don't summon me. And this is what probably in that fit of drunkenness, he gets angry and he makes all these decisions. And this is what happens. And in chapter 2, now we read in verse 1, it says, Acher hadevrim hale uh, beshon hamet hamelech Achashverosh zokhor et vashti zot asher ase zot asher nazir Elia. And he says, and after some time, when the anger of the Lord, when the anger of King Ahasuerus subsided, he thought of Vashti. What did he do? He thought of Vashti and what he had done, and what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. This was a man who, you know, you can say he was just so corrupted that everything was just gratuitous right now. Right now, full of immediate, I want everything right now. All decisions were emotional. All decisions were out of touch, feel, lust, what he could see, what he processed. That's it. There was no depth of any kind of wisdom in this man. He lived for the moment. He lived on the plushness of life. He lived on gratuitous. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. And then the after, when he's sitting down and he's thinking, oh, what happened? Why did I do this? And all this. He said, man. And then he calls his courtiers, and then his courtiers, tell him, let beautiful young women uh, be brought to you and whoever you like, and this comes into picture. And then it introduces Mordecai. For it was his niece, he was a foster father to Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The maiden was shapely and beautiful, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai adopted her as his own daughter. And he told her, he said, you will go. By the way, Mordecai also lived inside the fortress. He was employed in the fortress. He knew the workings of everything. So uh, he was very much in play. He knew exactly what was happening. And by the way, I'll tell you, Mordecai was somebody who was exiled from Jerusalem. It was in his generation that he was brought from Jerusalem. He knew the glory of that temple, which was destroyed, and now he's living in a different place altogether. That's why when Haman brought out the edict that all Jews had to be killed, what did he do? He went about the streets tearing his clothes and weeping on the streets. Can you imagine? People say, oh, if something like this happens, you say, this is a mad man. What's he doing? Why is he doing this? Let's read that portion. Chapter 4. When Mordecai learned all that had happened, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. He went through the city, crying out loudly and bitterly until he came in front of the palace gate, for one could not enter into the palace gate wearing a sackcloth. Also, in every province that the king's command had been and the decree had been reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, wailing, and everybody lay in sackcloth and ashes. Now, do you understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? When you're on the plush of life, Haman is going to be thrown into the mix because correction and tikkun needs to be done in life. But this story is about rectification of King Saul, of the disobedience of King Saul. In fact, if Saul had done what he was supposed to do, there may not have been the story of Esther. There may not have been. In fact, it would not have been. For sure, I am saying this as a surety. Now, I want everybody to reflect on their lives. I keep saying this all the time, right? Reflect, reflect, reflect. It's a very important word that I keep using all the time. I keep telling everybody, sit down, reflect. Reflect on the past. Look at the choices and the actions you have made in life. And think about how those actions have impacted your life today. Today we are sitting and questioning, oh Lord, why have you done this to me? Why am I in this problem? Why do my children don't listen to me? Why is my husband and me separated? Why don't I have a good relationship with my in-laws? Why don't I have a good job? Why am I suffering without money? Why don't this and why and why and they're asking God all these questions, but you know what? We were too unintelligent and we were too so self-absorbed and rooted in Akashverosh, rooted in the spirit of Akashverosh to understand what we were doing. And those actions are playing out today in our life, and we're questioning God, God, why is this happening to me? And you know what? Every Haman in your life is put there for one reason. It's put there for one reason. That when you're on the plush of life, you're going to stoop down. You got to, from Purim, you've got to come to Pesach. Now Pesach now suddenly comes to highlight. It's important. Why is Pesach important to me? It's important to me. Why? Because I have to rectify the corrupted portion of what happened during Purim. So Purim comes, I'm redeemed from that evil that's there. But you know what? The Jews were still there, right? They still enjoyed the plushness of the land. It is only a couple of years after this that King Dariavesh gives the decree and the command to Ezra and Nehemiah, saying, go back to Israel and to Judea and rebuild the temple of God. Now, the sages say that King Dariavesh obviously uh, is supposed to be the son of Queen Esther. So, if she is Jewish, Dariavesh is from a Jewish mother and he's Jewish too. The sages say that he is their progeny. Okay, although sometimes in history it's called Dariavesh the Mede or Madai. I'm not too sure. I cannot concur on this. I cannot confirm it, but there is a reason why uh, Daryavesh also is uh, is put into this mix, into this plot. Okay, there is Cyrus also who gives the initial. Then is Daryavesh who actually sends out and completes that. You'll know the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. I don't have to tell you all about it. But now we see that the rebellion of Saul, the redemption of Purim, finally leads to the end of the galut, end of the exile. And in the end of the exile, now they're going back to the land and they're rebuilding the temple, my friends. And when we talk about rebuilding the temple, what are we talking about? Talking about that this temple that I am in, is this holy and sanctified for God. In its peak of life, Haman was thrown to me. Have I overcome? Have I come to Pesach? Have I prepared myself? And have I prepared this temple for the living God? And when I overcome these two redemptions, these two types of redemptions, that symbolizes the two extreme places where human being can be from everything to nothing, from everything to nothing. Then I prepare a place for God. Then I will be given the decree to go prepare and build a place for God to dwell in, friends. So we're seeing a lot more than what the story of Esther is all about. It can be just read as a historical story. It can be read as a wonderful story. It can be read to children and tell them about Queen Esther, or how beautiful she was and the role she played. Come on. I mean, we have to look deeper into the things that are unseen, into the spiritual realm that is talking about the hidden redemption. That's why I named today's special teaching Purim, the hidden redemption. So, friends, I hope you'll absorb these things. I hope you'll are blessed with everything that has been brought to all of you all. And I don't want to read the entire story verse by verse. I was asked a very important question today. Someone called me and asked me a very important question. He said, at the end of the story, we see that the Jewish people defended themselves. And there was a great slaughter throughout the provinces of Persia. That wherever there were Jews, they defended themselves and they slaughtered the people who came to kill them. Right? And the fear of the Jews was so much because of that. And the fear of Mordecai was so great that the entire table, uh, the full narrative was changed overnight. So the question that was posed to me was, I mean, Yeshua tells me, if someone slaps you on your left cheek, give me a right cheek also. I mean, is this what is happening out here? So I thought about that question, and this is what I answered. I said it's circumstantial. Defending is not being aggressive. If you have to defend not only yourself, if you have to defend your faith, if you have to defend your God, if you have to defend your old parents and your wife, and if you have to defend your children and the sick and the needy from certain death, will you not do it? You should. To not defend has far greater consequences than to defend. To live in fear is equally disastrous than to live in complete bravery and boldness. A bold and aggressive person commits a sin, no doubt, to himself and to the person in the front. He slays a person in the front with his anger and his bravery or his boldness and his whatever you want to call it. It's him, the person in the front. He does grievous hurt to the person in the front. He. But a person in fear does not only destroy himself, but he destroys everyone else around him. And that's a far greater accountability. Let me explain to you. If you don't stand up for yourself firmly, if you don't protect your faith, if you don't protect your God, if you don't protect the people who are given to you under your care, then you're going to get all of them into trouble. Why? Because when they are challenged and you stand and say, okay, it's me, talk to me, not them. You take the burden on you, they are saved. If you cower down and you are in fear, they will come to help you. And when they come to help you, anything can happen to them, friends. And you're going to be responsible for them. So don't fear. It's better to be bold and strong than to fear and put everybody else in trouble. So the answer I gave him, yes, the Jewish people defended themselves in the story. And they slaughtered people. They slaughtered people because not because they went out to slaughter them, because when the people came to kill them, they stood up. They defended them. So I think in God's sight, yes, they took lives, but there was some merit in that. So learn to defend yourselves, friends. Now, when I say defend yourselves, I'm asking you to be responsible, and I'm asking you to be judicious, and I'm asking you to be do this with wisdom and understanding and kindness. But defend your faith, defend your God, and defend all those people who under your care and protection. This was a great question out of this entire story. Someone asked me, and I thought about it. And this is what I wanted to tell that person. I said, this is what I think it is. And I would definitely go down the path of defending if I'm put in that situation. Okay, I'm telling you as a from a personal point. I've had highs in life, and I know the times when God has thrown Haman into the mix. It's true. And I've had lows in life, and I've hit not from Purim, but I've hit Pesach also. And I'm saying this, I'm teaching all this out of experience, friends. I have many people saying, okay, I want to, I want to do the feast, Purim. I want to perform the feast. I want to do Pesach, and I want to do Sukkot, and I want to do Shavuot. It's so easy to do all this stuff and to hold the feast and to put this and to make sukkahs. And guys, I tell you, it's so easy to do ritualistic behavior. But if you're not changed from inside, if it's not internalized, if all these things are not internalized inside of you, you're going to be as lost as a stray donkey walking around the face of this earth, friends. So please internalize everything we've studied. Understand that behind the story of Esther, there is a greater thing which is happening. There is a hidden redemption happening in your life. Look at your lives. If you're on the peak of life, or if you're in the low of the life, if you're on Purim or if you're on Pesach, whichever place you're in life, may God bless each one of you all. May God redeem you all, bless each one of you all, and give you all shalom in its completeness. Chag, hope you all had a lovely Chag, Simcha, and full joy for this day, friends. Shalom, until we meet next time. Litraot. Yom Tov.